Wow, so much is happening in the world right now. Like, seriously, a lot. We got to talk about Ukraine, right? That's like the big thing.
It really is. And, it's been going on for so long. So this potential shift toward peace talks, that's huge.
It really is. I mean, who would have thought, right? Trump actually, picked up the phone and talked to both Putin and Zelensky.
Yeah, that's pretty big news, isn't it? Especially because, remember, during his campaign, he was always saying, I can end this war in 24 hours.
Yeah, like it was just some kind of campaign talk, right?
Right. But now he's saying he's doing this because millions of people could die.
That changes things a bit, doesn't it? Makes it feel more real.
Absolutely. It definitely adds a sense of urgency, like something has to happen now.
Okay, so phone calls.
Yeah.
What do we actually know about what happened on these calls? Like, what were they even talking about?
Well, with Putin, Trump spoke for over an hour. The Kremlin called it a long and productive conversation. Putin even invited Trump to Moscow.
Whoa, a Moscow meeting. Can you imagine?
Imagine the headlines. And there's another call with Zelensky.
Oh, right. Zelensky. Okay, so what about that one?
It was also an hour long, and both Putin and Zelensky, they both said they wanted peace, according to Trump.
Okay, so everyone's saying the right things, but what are they, actually saying? What are the details here?
Right, what's the substance?
Yeah, is there actually something here, or is it just talk?
Okay, well, the Kremlin, in their statement, they said it's important to deal with, the root causes of the war.
Root causes. That sounds kind of vague, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's something they say a lot, but what they mean is, they think NATO expanding is a big problem.
Like they feel threatened by it.
Right, and they see it as, breaking promises that were made after the Cold War.
It was all about security. For them, they feel like the West is ignoring them.
That's their perspective. Yeah, they're basically saying, look, we're doing this because you pushed us into a corner.
So they're playing defense, at least that's how they see it.
Exactly, and that's really different from what a lot of people in the West believe.
Like two totally different stories, right?
Right. And if there's going to be any chance of peace, well, everyone needs to understand where the other side's coming from. But there's this other part of the Kremlin's statement that I found really interesting. They said, the time has come for our countries to work together.
Whoa, that's not what I expected. That sounds almost friendly, right?
It does, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, are they serious about wanting to de-escalate, or is this some kind of tactic, maybe to cause problems between the U.S. and Europe?
It's tough to say, right? We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Okay, so what about Zelensky? What's he thinking about all this peace talk stuff?
Well, he's been super clear. If there are going to be peace talks, Ukraine has got to be a part of them. He's basically saying, you can't have a conversation about my country without me.
Makes sense, right? It's his country that's being invaded. He can't just be left out.
Right, exactly. And he's also been talking a lot about Ukraine's capabilities.
Like what? What do they have that's so special?
He's talking about technology, especially their drones and all these other industries they're developing. I think he's trying to show everyone that Ukraine's not just some helpless victim,
He's trying to project strength, we're not backing down.
Exactly. It's he's saying, we're here to stay. And we're going to fight for our future.
So we have Zelensky fighting for his seat at the table, while Trump's making these power moves, talking to Putin directly. It's all kind of crazy, isn't it?
It is. And it really makes you wonder, what's going to happen with U.S. policy? Will Trump listen to Zelensky and make sure Ukraine's part of any deal? Or will he just try to make a deal with Putin, even if it hurts Ukraine?
That's the big question, isn't it? What's more important? A quick end to the war, or making sure Ukraine's safe in the long run?
Yeah, and whatever happens, it's not just going to affect Ukraine. It'll change things all over the world.
Right, how much power does the U.S. really have? And what about Russia? It's this giant chess game, and everyone's trying to figure out their next move.
Yeah, and the stakes are incredibly high. But before we get too deep into that, let's talk about the U.S. side. Some interesting things have been happening there, too,
Oh, okay, yeah, like what? What's going on with the U.S.?
Well, the U.S. stance seems to be changing a bit. For example, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, he recently said that it's unrealistic for Ukraine to get back all the land they lost in 2014 or to join NATO.
Wait, seriously? But that was a big deal for Ukraine, right? Joining NATO.
It was. And the U.S. has always supported that idea. So this statement from Hegseth, well, it could mean the U.S. is starting to soften its position.
So maybe they're willing to give something to Russia to get peace.
It's possible, yeah. It'll be interesting to see how the other NATO countries react to that, They've been pretty united so far in supporting Ukraine.
Right. And I can't imagine they'd be happy about the U.S. just making deals without them.
It definitely adds another layer of complexity, doesn't it? And then there's the whole thing with the prisoner swap.
Oh, right. I almost forgot about that. That was pretty big news, too.
It was. Russia let go of this American teacher, Mark Fogel. He was in jail for drug charges.
And in return, the U.S. released
Alexander Vinnik. He's Russian, and he was convicted of money laundering.
Classic prisoner swap.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder if it was like planned to happen right now, with all this peace talk stuff going on.
Yeah, the timing is definitely interesting. And then you have Trump publicly thanking Putin for letting Fogel go.
Right. It just makes the whole situation even more confusing. So we have this push for peace, people saying they want to work together, maybe the U.S. changing its position, a prisoner exchange. It's a lot to keep track of.
It is, isn't it? It's like everyone's at a poker table trying to figure out who's bluffing and who's got the best hand.
And the stakes are huge. We're not just talking about some political game. This is about people's lives, the fate of an entire country. It's heavy stuff.
It really is. Millions of people are caught in the middle of this, and whatever happens next, it's going to affect them the most.
And another thing that's kind of weird is the timing of this whole thing. Yeah, why now? Like, why is everyone suddenly so interested in peace? It's been going on forever, right?
Well, think about it. Trump's been saying all along that, if he'd been president when the war started, it never would happen.
Oh, yeah. He says that a lot, doesn't he?
He does. So maybe this whole peace talk thing, it's his way of proving he's right. Like, see? I'm the only one who can fix this mess.
Makes sense. It fits with this whole, I'm the deal maker image, right?
Exactly. But there's also a chance this could backfire, Like, what if this is exactly what Putin wants?
What do you mean?
Well, Russia's done this before in other conflicts. They use negotiations to stall, buy themselves time to regroup and, get stronger.
That's kind of scary, isn't it? Like pretending to want peace while they're actually planning something else.
Exactly. So the big question is Trump going to fall for that? Or can he actually use this to get a real peace, one that's good for everyone, especially Ukraine?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, how much influence does Trump really have over Putin? They haven't always gotten along,
Yeah, Putin's not easy to deal with. He only respects strength, If he thinks Trump's weak, he's going to walk all over him.
So Trump has to play this perfectly, or it could all blow up in his face.
Exactly. And if it goes wrong, well, the consequences could be really bad. Like, imagine if Russia gets everything they want and Ukraine's left hanging.
That would be a disaster.
It would. It would make Putin look super strong and the U.S. would look weak. It would mess up the whole balance of power,
So this is about way more than just Ukraine, isn't it?
It is, yeah. This is about the future of, global security and international law, all that stuff. It's a big deal.
And we can't forget about the people in Ukraine, right? Like all this talk about politics and power. But at the end of the day, it's their lives that are at stake.
Absolutely. They're the ones who are suffering. And any peace deal has to take that into account, It has to address the human cost of this whole thing.
Right. It's easy to get caught up in the big picture, but we have to remember the real people who are hurting because of this war.
And ultimately, it's Zelensky who has to make the tough calls,
Yeah.
Does he negotiate with Putin, the guy who invaded his country, or does he keep fighting, even though it's costing so much?
Man, that's a no-win situation, isn't it? Either way, it sucks.
It does. But you got to give Zelensky credit. He's handled this whole thing pretty well. He's become a symbol of resistance,
Yeah, he's definitely got the world's attention.
He does, but that's not enough. He needs actual help, military aid, money, and support from other countries. He can't do this alone.
Okay, so that brings up another question. What about everyone else? What are the other countries doing? Can they help make peace happen?
That's a good question. I mean, the U.S. and Russia are the main players here, but other countries are affected too, especially in Europe.
Right. They're dealing with all the refugees, and their economies are taking a hit too.
Exactly. So they got to have a say in this whole thing. They can't just sit back and watch. And then there's China. They're kind of in a weird spot, right?
Yeah, they want to stay friends with Russia, but they don't want to make the West mad either. It's a tough balancing act.
It is. And whatever they decide to do, it's going to have a big impact on what happens next.
So it's like this giant puzzle with all these different pieces, and no one knows how it's going to fit together.
Yeah, it's complicated. But one thing's for sure. The stakes are high, and whatever happens is going to change the world. It's a pretty intense moment in history.
No kidding. It's like we're watching a movie, except this is real life and there's no rewind button.
And remember, this isn't just some abstract political thing, This is about real people, real lives that are being torn apart by this war.
That's the thing we can't forget. It's easy to get lost in all the talk about strategy and negotiations, but the human cost of this, it's real and it's heartbreaking.
It is. And that's why no matter what happens, we have to keep pushing for peace, a real peace that works for everyone, a peace that lets people rebuild their lives and move forward. And, with all this talk about peace, it's got to be real, right? Not just some fake thing to make everyone feel better.
Yeah, like, what's the point of a ceasefire if it just means everyone's going to start fighting again in a few months? That wouldn't solve anything.
Exactly. We need a real peace, something that actually addresses the problems that started this whole mess.
Okay, so what does that even look like? Like, what needs to happen for this to actually work?
Well, first off, everyone's got to be willing to talk,
Right.
really talk, even about the hard stuff, and be ready to give a little to get a little.
Yeah, but compromise can't mean letting Russia just walk all over Ukraine, right? Ukraine has to be able to make its own decisions without anyone forcing them to do something they don't want to.
Absolutely. Any deal that doesn't respect Ukraine's independence, it's not going to last. Ukraine needs to be a big part of any peace talks, and they got to be sure that they'll be safe afterwards.
So it can't just be promises, right? There have to be real guarantees, something to make sure Russia doesn't just turn around and attack again.
Exactly. It's also going to take a lot of work to rebuild trust.
Yeah.
After all the fighting and all the lies, it's hard to believe anyone's going to be honest. But if we want a real peace, a peace that lasts, well, we got to find a way to trust each other again.
Man, that sounds really hard. How do you even start to do that after everything that's happened?
It's a huge challenge, no doubt. But we got to try, right? The alternative is just too awful to think about.
Yeah, you're right. Okay, so we've talked about what a good peace deal might look like, but what are the things we should be watching for in the next few weeks, months? How will we know if this is actually going somewhere?
Well, the first thing is, do these talks even happen? Are Trump and Putin going to actually meet face to face? Will they invite Zelensky? That'll tell us a lot.
Yeah, and if they do meet, what are they going to talk about? What's each side willing to give up? Are there things they absolutely won't budge on?
Those are the big questions, and we won't know the answers until we see how things play out. It's also going to be interesting to see what other countries do, especially in Europe and China. Are they going to help with the talks or try to mess things up?
And what about the people in Ukraine? What do they think about all this? Are they hopeful? Or are they scared?
That's the most important thing, right? It's their lives, their country. They got to have a say in what their future looks like. We can't forget about them.
So, bottom line, it's still super uncertain, right? We don't know if this is going to lead to peace or just more fighting.
Yeah, it's a really tense moment. But it's also a chance to, rethink things. Maybe the whole thing can teach us something about how to prevent wars in the future.
Hopefully we can learn from this, right?
Yeah.
Because this war, it's been a tragedy for everyone involved.
It has. And it just shows how important it is to keep working for peace, to never give up on finding a better way.
Well said. So to everyone listening, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep the people of Ukraine in your thoughts. Is this genuine progress toward ending the war, or just another political maneuver by Trump? What do you think the next few weeks will hold? Subscribe to our podcast, available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube.
We are here to make things clear.